District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. I have returned from Southwest Florida after attending this past weekend the IOTR, the International Order of T. Roosevelt Annual Meeting. And listeners are very familiar with some of the leadership. We've had Luke Hilgeman, who is CEO. We've had Kenya Link, who does communications and also hosts their Hunt, Fish, Freedom podcast as well. They're in the arena fighting for conservation, particularly with hunting and fishing, and you'll be hearing more about their efforts going forward, but we are fans of them. I am personally a fan of IOTR, love what the good folks do there, and I'm going to recap a little bit briefly while I'm speaking with you today about my impressions and experience at their summit in beautiful Bonita Springs, Florida, in southwestern Florida, one of my favorite places in the whole wide United States. It's a very idyllic place. You see the sunsets on the western side, so you see the sunrise on the east, the sunset in the west, and it's wonderful. And it was very warm. It felt like the summer. I got a nice tan, very much needed to do that because I've gotten too pale being indoors this past winter. So got a good tan, did not get to go fishing. Sometimes when you're at outdoor conferences, it's okay to just relax and just enjoy your surroundings. And I've needed that with all the wonderful work I've been doing for my day job as a policy director and also with the podcast. So it's okay to relax a little bit, even if you're outdoorsy, and just get some vitamin D. That's all I wanted to do. Most importantly, however, was the gist of the event, the annual meeting. This is the third or fourth one, if I'm not mistaken, and they're going to be having it again in the same region of the United States next year, I believe in mid-April, a little earlier, which might work better for my schedule too. So I'm hoping to go for a second time next year, but they've had this event annually for the last few years, and what an impactful event. I do love going to the bigger B2B shows, the B2C shows, business to consumer, business to business. SHOT Show, I think I've retired from that because that just coincides too much with things for work, and going to Vegas in the winter is a little too exhausting. Maybe I will return in the near future, but for now, I won't be going to SHOT Show. But I've gone to 4 or 5 SHOT Shows. It's a great trade show. I like SEI conferences. I've been to 3 now over the last 5 or so years. I am returning to ICAST this summer. I go every couple of years, and I'm going to be covering the show for my own freelancing duties, including here on the podcast, and also do an accompanying write-up. So the big trade shows are great, and they're wonderful, and it's reunions with friends, people you want to see, making cool content, making some more contacts, the like. They're phenomenal, and I'm not knocking them, but I think smaller, more intimate gatherings like this, where there are a couple hundred people in attendance, is more ideal for me because I can see more people, I can befriend new people, I can catch up with friends. There's great appeal with both big and small conferences, but I think I like the intimacy of smaller events like this and am inclining myself more to that. But again, it doesn't mean I wouldn't be going to the bigger trade shows. I do go to the big trade shows, but those can be overwhelming at times, and you don't get to see everyone you want to see. So I think these smaller gatherings are great. And also the POMA annual meeting, which is happening at the end of May. I hope those of you who are members or those of you curious about POMA will come to that. But sticking with IOTR and what I want to discuss with you all, IOTR does a lot with conservation, namely and chiefly with the right to hunt and fish. And why the right to hunt fish? Why is it so important? I want to reiterate that we do have a tax on the hunting, fishing, trapping, and even farming and ranching lifestyle. If you're looking at Initiative Petition 28, which is now going to be on the Oregon ballot, from what I understand, they obtained all the signatures needed to put it on the ballot to which it would be voted this election. It is very scary how close that is going to be. Alternatively, more positively, Colorado is now going to have an opportunity to vote for the right to hunt and fish. And I'm going to back it up a little bit as to what IOTR has done more recently with gains in this field and in this effort. We had talked earlier, you heard me talk earlier a few weeks ago with Fred Bird of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. We were very optimistic. A lot of us were thinking and optimistic and hopeful that New Hampshire would be state 25 to pass the right to hunt and fish. Even with a very friendly legislature, it did not clear past committee, if I'm not mistaken, the House of Representatives there, even though the governor would have signed it into law, but there was some probably weird wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. So New Hampshire, not this go around, perhaps next time. However, IOTR was very instrumental in helping with a lot of stakeholders and Floridians that I met and that I'm friends with who were very pivotal in the passage of Yes on 2. The second, not quite the Second Amendment, but it was Yes on 2 Amendment 2, that was adopted into law by over 67% by Florida voters in 2024. And a million more people voted for this amendment than reelecting President Trump. So that's super fascinating. And that was honed in on that this is an issue that crosses partisan lines too, even if people might be conservative who are leading it. But of course, the right to hunt and fish should be supported by everyone, regardless of how they vote. We did touch on Maine, how it became state 25 through the force of lawsuits, and piggybacking off of, if you need a refresher from what I talked about a couple episodes ago, about this statutory means by which Maine now has this. So they have the right to food, which IOTR and a couple others filed a lawsuit to ensure that that standard could also be applied to the right to hunt and fish. So not quite the get it past the legislature. They actually were very close. They had 3 legislators, sadly, who flipped their votes with the support and influence of Sierra Club, that darn Sierra Club, always obfuscating and obstructing conservation. They don't like nuclear energy and they don't like hunting and fishing. Not surprising. So Sierra Club's hand is why there was not the traditional path to getting this on the ballot in Maine, which is having midterm elections this year. But by the statutory mean, now Maine is de facto the 25th state. As I was in Florida leading up to it, and as of yesterday, April 27th, petition gathering began in Colorado for potentially putting this on the ballot. We have seen a lot of anti-hunting, anti-fishing, conservation ballot initiatives that have gone to a vote have been defeated in some instances. Sadly, the wolf reintroduction, now people are more heightened to this because of the wolf reintroduction by ballot box biology and the failure with that experiment. Even in blue Colorado, there have been, thankfully, measures defeated. The cat ban, a couple others, I believe the Denver fur ban, but then the Fish and Game Commission passed something recently concerning fur, and I believe I talked about that. So it's a volleying back and forth of good and bad, bad and good. But this is a very positive, forward-thinking effort, and I want to read for you, since I haven't touched on it yet, an email chimp that went out on April 22nd. So this is when the announcement first came out ahead of IOTR Summit, where Colorado Initiative 302, which would be the ballot measure to enshrine the right to hunt and fish in Colorado, is now going to be in the petition gathering stage. They have to gather a substantial amount of signatures, I believe, before August. So they said, Initiative 302, unanimously clears the state title board, and I'm reading from a constant contact email that IOTR sent, officially greenlighting proponents to begin gathering signatures. And like I said, that formally began yesterday, the 27th. The title board, comprised of representatives of the Secretary of State, AG, and Office of Legislative Legal Services, approved the measure's language last week. That was a week before April 22nd. The proposed constitutional amendment would permanently protect hunting and fishing in Colorado, ensuring they are preserved for future generations. This is a quote from Luke Hilgeman, CEO of IOTR. He says, Colorado stands at a decisive inflection point in the future of wildlife management, outdoor heritage, and rural economic stability. The title board action presents a clear and achievable opportunity to enshrine the right to hunt and fish in the Colorado Constitution, protecting a generations-long tradition while locking in science-based wildlife management for the future. And they're working very closely with Dan Gates, his group out there, and I believe a coalition of maybe 36 other related organizations. So Colorado has been center ground for this battle of the future of conservation. And federally, as everyone is aware, those threats are not as pervasive and as evident. The Trump administration sometimes doesn't get everything right, and I think they're doing much better than the Biden admin. But federally, you don't have to worry about hunting and fishing being cut off or obstructed or anything like that. But it's the states that this experiment is unfolding. And we've seen in blue states, unsurprisingly, that appointment of commissioners, ballot measures, ballot biology have really hurt conservation and the outdoor heritage in those respective states. So Colorado, if all things go to plan, at IOTR's annual meeting on the Saturday dinner, About $5 million plus was raised for the Colorado Right to Hunt and Fish effort, and it's going to take millions of dollars. I'm not a wealthy person, so I don't think I can donate financially, but I'm going to donate my time and venues like this to assist with that. And I know there's going to be other far more generous people who have plentiful resources financially who can chip in. And if you have that capability, please throw any resources financially that you have. I know there might be some people listening who are connected well with deep pockets to do that. But these ballot initiatives take millions of dollars, and the antis might try to wage their own opposite campaign, counter it with millions of dollars in opposition. And so that's going to be something to watch in Colorado, potentially, if there's enough support. And I think there will be. If I remember Luke saying this correctly during the summit, during the annual meeting, that the threshold of winning in Colorado is slightly less than in Florida. It doesn't take 60%. I think it takes 55% of the vote. So it's a little bit easier to clear. I did clarify with a search that it is 55% threshold in order for a constitutional amendment to be enacted and adopted into the state constitution in the case of Colorado. So that is very encouraging. Colorado was the big focus of the conference, and then also just drawing awareness to some of the other states that IOTR is focusing on. What also was a really key highlight was their partnerships that they do with the Cabela's Family Foundation. We've had Dan Cabela on, who hosts The Hard Truths of Conservation on several channels, and his team, and they do phenomenal work with storytelling. So they partner with them for their TV show. They spoke at length about some of the initiatives and projects and videos that they're working on. So it was great to hear what they were up to. There's also a big emphasis with it being in Florida, and Florida kind of being the groundswell from which IOTR was able to get more involved, being a several-year-old organization. That, like I said, they really played a pivotal role in passing the Florida Right to Hunt and Fish. So using Florida as a backdrop, they were able to highlight my friend Mike Elfenbein and his group of activists that he works closely with, biologists, the Miccosukee tribe, private landowners, hunter conservationists for deer reintroduction efforts in the Everglades region. I won't go too much into detail with that because that is a project that is still under wraps, but they are working very adamantly to help restore deer populations there. And this cross-collaboration effort that you often don't really hear about because we sadly see a tussling and a battle between, let's say, producers or consumptive users, energy producers, agriculture interests versus hunters, anglers, recreationists. And it's very easy to scapegoat producers, whether they're agriculture or in energy. Yet what people forget is oftentimes people who work in those industries also like to partake in the same activities that we do. I have not gone to an event in the last few years where I did not meet someone who works in oil and gas who also did not appreciate hunting and fishing. In fact, at my one recent Pennsylvania talk, the president of Pyoga, the organization that hosted me, is an avid fly fisherman. His wife likes to go hunting. You meet people who work in agriculture. I've talked about a lot of the people that are associated with Mike Elfenbein and others that are ranchers and hunters. I've talked about, it was 5 years ago now, my Cows Keep Florida Green, that expose and just our foray into learning about the conservation playbook that exists in Florida. To me, it reminds a lot of Alaska. Alaska is greatly misunderstood by people in the lower 48, and I'm a lower 48er. I reside below Alaska, and I don't reside in Hawaii, so I'm in the continental U.S., but I understand people in Alaska. I've been there, I've reported from there, and I've talked about the different exposés there too. Again, people don't understand about resource management, balanced use, or they forget and kind of veer too much into the preservationist. And I've even seen this with hook and bullet people sometimes, where they buy into a lot of the misinformation about, let's say a mining project or an energy project, traditional or otherwise, and then they don't have that same outrage with a renewable energy project. It's selective outrage. And I want to reemphasize that this is not really what IOTR touches upon. This is my commentary here, that every project comes with trade-offs. Every industry has trade-offs, but there are lots of industries that we are dependent upon that don't get appreciated even when they do conservation work, and even when their workers and employees also are members of our wider community in the hook and bullet crowd. So Florida and Mike Elfenbein and his panel, Luke Hilgeman was also on this panel. I posted some pictures online. You could see this. They were talking about the different coalition they have, the stakeholders that are involved in deer reintroduction efforts and conservation. Like I said, it's a unique model with multiple uses, multiple sectors, multiple stakeholders coming together, people you don't traditionally think of as conservationists, even coming together. IOTR is looking for different relationships and partnerships like that as well, which is why I'm so drawn to their message. And I've befriended the folks there and really inclined myself to them. And we have a lot of actually overlap in politics too, funny enough. That's just how a lot of these friendships and partnerships work out. You have similar connections, you have similar ties, and you know the same people. And then you're working together in conservation. There's that aha moment that lights up in your head and you're like, oh my gosh, we were destined to be connected and somehow work together and support each other. And that's what I feel like when I go to IOTR, venues like IOTR and their annual summit. We were supposed to hear from Brett Baer, Fox News anchor, and I got a signed copy of his book on Theodore Roosevelt. And although I have studied a little bit of TR and I know about him historically, of course, and he was the founder of the national parks, essentially, although the first national park was signed into law and official under Ulysses S. Grant, a fellow Republican, TR, of course, gave light and birth to the National Park Service, what we know as the National Park Service in the early 1900s. And TR, of course, is the big theme and the big kind of piece that encapsulates the work that IOTR does. I think I have a lot of alignment with TR, mostly on conservation issues. On his other areas, not so much, and that's okay. But I appreciate him as like the godfather of conservation, and you can, even as a free market person. There was a great TR impersonator. I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but he really did the act superbly. So Brett Baer might be coming next year to talk about his book when he doesn't have any conflicts. I also got to record an episode of the Hunt Fish Freedom podcast with host Kenya Link, who is also a staff member of IOTR. Great young lady, very plugged into the hunting and fishing world. She's harvested some incredible animals for her age. In her late 20s, she is phenomenal, very smart, has a master's degree, knows a lot about this, and is a great communicator. And we had a lot of fun recording a podcast together in person this time. I hope listeners will be on the lookout for that in the next few weeks. I assume it's going to come out in the next couple of weeks. There were so many extraordinary people that I met, some folks that I met from SCI this year, new contacts that I met at some IOTR focused events earlier this year, some new contacts, some friends of friends. It was just delightful and wonderful. I also met the new NRA president. They are starting to clean up house, and he has said when I reach out to him, I still owe him an email, that he would like to come on the podcast and explain what they're doing. So we might be breaking some news and talking about some interesting stuff going forward in the next few months and weeks about legacy organizations that are starting to get improved, because I'm a former NRA member. I'm a lapsed member because I was very distraught and very disappointed with the direction they were going and with all the corruption. I used to do a lot with NRA, and I'm really interested to see with the new leadership, they've expunged some of lots of the corrupt people. They just had their annual meeting. It looked like a great event. So we will be getting him on the show hopefully very soon. Lots of connections that are made. Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation president and CEO Jeff Crane was also honored with IOTR's annual Conservation Champion Award. Saw lots of people from DC, a couple people from DC that I work with and know as well. Your world's coming together. This is how small conservation is. You know someone who knows someone. There's always like a second or third degree of separation. I had a blast. I look forward to hopefully going next year, and I should hopefully have an accompanying write-up, but please support IOTR and their efforts to pass the right to hunt and fish. Support their partnerships with the Cabela's Family Foundation, their show, The Hard Truth of Conservation, their efforts for deer reintroduction in the Florida Everglades and related projects, but especially the right to hunt and fish. Let's see if we could get Colorado to pass this. So I plan to dedicate some time on the podcast this summer to highlighting what is happening in Colorado. I might do a conservation country video out that way, go back to Colorado to see what is going on there, and possibly in Oregon for efforts to fight IP28. An abundance of gratitude to Luke, Kenya, Lori, the IOTR board, all the staff. It was wonderful to join you in Florida, and I hope we get to revisit again very soon. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.